Hello everyone and welcome back to Transcendent Philosophy. Today we're going to be discussing the philosophy of love, specifically in the anime Vinland Saga, the philosophy of love that Canute learns from his mentor, the priest. And as an introduction, Vinland Saga is an anime that's set in a historical setting around 1000 AD, and the characters are Vikings and Christians, and the anime does an interesting job of pitting these two cultures against each other and contrasting their values. The Vikings loving warfare, courage, honor, and a glorious death, where the Christians, they value submission, peace, love, turning the other cheek, and humility. And Canute is positioned between these two cultures. He's a prince, and a very cowardly prince at that. So in Viking terms, Canute is a failure. He is the antithesis of a courageous Viking. But Canute is wondering, as he observes these Vikings, he's wondering if maybe there's a better way. Maybe he doesn't have to be like the Vikings. And so he's starting to listen to the Christians to see if there's a better way he can become king. So with that, we'll jump into some scenes from Vinland Saga. To start off, we'll be seeing how cowardly Canute is.
Yes, just leave it to me. Your Highness.
And then we'll jump straight into a dream of the ghost of Ragnar, the father figure of this prince, caretaker, mentor, loved one. And we're going to slowly walk through some of the themes that are coming up.
My prince.
Ragnar! You're back! You're alive! No, I'm dreaming, aren't I?
Yes, I've come to say goodbye to you, my prince.
You're going? Leaving me behind? You expect me to go on living in a world like this? All alone? Do you truly think I can survive?
It's my fault. I was tasked to be the one who'd mentor you, and I failed terribly. I was meant to raise you to be a Jarl, but I simply raised you as a child. The way that any man might go about bringing up a son of his very own. Though I knew quite well that wasn't what the king desired for you, I pray you can forgive me.
What's wrong with that? You looked out for me, far more than my father the king ever has! I never wanted to be born with royal blood. I wish I was Ragnar. I would have been so much happier if I'd been your son.
My prince, you fill this old heart with joy, Your Highness.
Please don't go. I love you so much.
Some things are gained from experiencing a loss. But a clever young man like you must know that already.
Ragnar,
I'm only a dream, my prince.
wait.
The time has come for you to finally awaken.
No, Ragnar, come back. Come back!
Live your life well, Your Highness.
Ragnar.
What you can see from these clips is how Canute relies on Ragnar very heavily. Ragnar is almost a crutch for him. And with the passing of Ragnar, Canute has no one to rely on anymore. He's weak, he's cowardly, he doesn't know what he's supposed to do, and his only support, the only person that ever loved him, is gone. And he doesn't know how to live in this world. He's being pushed to his limits, and he has to figure out a new strategy, or he knows he's going to perish in this harsh world full of violence and bloodshed.
Your Highness, you weren't hurt, were you? Those men over there, they're fighting each other over who will obtain you, and then you'll become the possession of the victor.
You're a servant of the Lord, so why don't you try to stop them?
How am I to stop such hate? It's much more sensible to let those who want to die perish.
I had a dream. It was about Ragnar. He bade me farewell. Even in death, he was loyal. There's no one left anymore. No one in this wretched world who loves me.
Seems you found great enlightenment, Your Highness, but missed the mark. Was the emotion that Ragnar felt towards you actually love? Remember, he stood by and watched as 62 innocent villagers were slain for your safety. Highness, I must ask you, what is love?
And then you say that Ragnar didn't truly love me?
That's right.
Then I'd like to ask you something as well. If Ragnar didn't have love, then where's the one who can properly display what love is?
He's right over there. Just look. He has perished, and is far more beautiful now than when he was alive. The embodiment of love itself. He can no longer hate, or hurt, or steal from the weak. His remains will keep here until the snow thaws, and what's left behind will be a great bounty to beasts and insects alike. You will be left as is in the cold rain. You will bear it all without a single complaint. For death is what truly completes a human being.
So, death itself is the essence of love?
Yes.
A parent caring for their child, lovers embracing, or the way Ragnar cared about me as well. What are you saying that feeling is then?
It's discrimination. The way one might attentively fawn over a king, then proceed to whip a slave. Your Highness was immensely important to Ragnar. More than anyone else in the world, I'd wager. He probably valued you more than his own life, in fact. That said, his tender feelings toward you were one thing alone. Discrimination.
I see.
So the priest begins to challenge Canute's understanding of love. For Canute, it seemed obvious that Ragnar was the one who loved him the most out of anyone. He was the one who cared for him, protected him, stood up for him. And the priest was trying to get Canute to look deeper, right? And so Canute, he is trying to figure out, like, if what Ragnar has for me is not love, what is that, right? And the priest responds with discrimination. All right, this is interesting because this opens us up into Peter Singer's Expanding Circle. Peter Singer is a philosopher who wrote a book called The Expanding Circle, and it's a paradigm of the philosophy of love. And so within the Expanding Circle, you can have love for different scopes, right? So a circle would be the scope of your love. And so if you have love for yourself, then there's a small circle and there's just you inside the circle, and that's your scope of love. If you love someone else, your circle expands to include someone else. If you love your family, your circle expands to include your family. If you love your tribe, your race, your religion, your city, your neighborhood, your state, your nation, your circle is expanding to love all of the people within that circle. But what the priest is trying to highlight is all of these circles are fundamentally flawed, right? Because these circles are exclusionary. There's an in-group and then there's an out-group. And what the priest is trying to highlight is if you've drawn the line between who you love and who you don't love, that's not universal. And that's why it's discrimination. That's why it's prejudice. So the priest is saying true love is fundamentally universal. And if you have a circle of love, you have fundamentally failed to be universal in your application of love. You failed to apply it to everyone equally, or everything equally. And so that's when the priest goes into the analogy of the corpse. The corpse is the embodiment of true love because the corpse gives to everyone and anything of itself freely, universally, without regard for selfish interest, without regard for reciprocal benefits, right? There's no discrimination. It loves the insects as well as the wolves equally, right?
I see. I'm starting to understand. And now, it feels like the fog is being lifted. Of course. The snow. It's love, isn't it?
It is.
That sky. And the sun. The blowing wind. The trees. The mountains. But then... how could this be? The world. God's creation has such beauty woven through it. But in the human soul, there is no love.
In this portion, Canute becomes overwhelmed with the beauty of the natural world. Once his eyes become open to this idea of universal love through absence of ego, absence of self-interest, absence of violence, right? Absence of intentionality. So by seeing the dead corpse as selfless and loving, he starts to see this universal love everywhere. He sees it in the snow, where the snow, it gives of itself to anyone who wants it. He sees it in the wind, just flowing about for anyone to take advantage of. He sees it in the sun freely giving of itself to the entire world, selflessly. So all of the natural resources, the trees, the apple on the tree, giving freely of itself to whoever wants it, with no discrimination, no self-interest.
God's creation has such beauty woven through it. But in the human soul, there is no love.
It is said the reason we've become creatures so far from grace is because long ago our ancestors disobeyed God's command and committed the first sin. And ever since then, mankind has been exiled from paradise. The battle seems to have come to an end. And yet, there's a problem. Man has lost his sanity. Highness, it would be better if you ran away.
Sanity, you say? In this accursed world, are there any sane men? Everyone. They're all the same. Equally ignorant. They have no idea what it takes to love. They don't understand the meaning of life and death. They don't even know why they fight.
They don't.
That's enough. I've grown tired of it. That which was lost in exchange for knowledge was what is most important, and that's something we'll never attain for as long as we live. Forever out of reach. And despite that, even then you tell us to seek it. Father in heaven! Miserable warrior, the one who's the very farthest from love, exiled from heaven. Is there any way, aside from death, to end the suffering of your punishment? What's our life's purpose? Tell me! Is it only meant to be tested and endured? Father in heaven, the test you have given this man will do nothing to save his soul!
All right, so we're beginning to have some powerful shifts in Canute's attitude. He's gone from coward to confused to enlightened to moved to tears at the beauty of the world, and then instantly into rage and anger and disgust at the nature of reality. What is going on here? Vinland is a little bit vague about what's going on, as you can tell. I think the best way to interpret this is through the lens of the Garden of Eden. So they were talking about the apple. They're kind of alluding to man has been banned from paradise, right? And they said that which was lost in exchange for knowledge, that was most valuable, okay? So I think what's going through Canute's mind is, in the Garden of Eden, we had the universal love. The lion was able to lie down peacefully with the lamb. Everyone was able to coexist in harmony because universal love was abound, right? And by taking of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, mankind was cursed. They were kicked out of paradise, and they were kicked out into the world to suffer, to learn the meaning of evil through suffering. And so, despite being kicked out of the Garden of Eden, Canute is beginning to feel like frustrated with the fact that God somehow expects us to pursue paradise even though we've been kicked out of it so brutally, right? He looks out into this world, it's brutal, and everyone is confused. People don't know why they're suffering. And he feels like God has done mankind dirty, right? He feels like this lesson that we're here to get is not productive. Like, this lesson is not working. He looks out at all these Vikings. They're absolutely clueless about what they're doing here. And he in frustration, he yells at God and says, your tests will accomplish nothing for these poor lost souls, these poor agents, right, that have no idea how to achieve universal love. And so Canute is beginning to develop his own religious ideology, where he wants to help others find this universal love, because he doesn't think that the natural world is working. These tests that God is giving us, they're not sufficient. There needs to be another way.
Almighty, I no longer seek your salvation. If you refuse to give it to us, we will make our own, a paradise on this earth, shaped by our own hands.
What's this? The prince?
There's no point? You think there's any point to your fighting? There's no meaning to any of these battles, so fight to stay alive. Warriors, become my vassals. I will teach you who you must fight and win, for a purpose. I will give meaning to your battles, to your life, and to your death. That is the duty of a king.
You have to survive. There's no one else. You're the only one who can unite 500 of these savages!
That's enough. Cease your fighting at once. Anyone who falls in this battle will die in vain.
It can't be. They're all dead.
I can. In any case, my life has no value to begin with.
You say that, but I've heard those words from the mouths of more men than I could hope to count. Most still beg to be spared when they realize I'm about to kill them. I suspect you're the same, aren't you? Damn, that look in his eyes. I've seen it before, and I don't like it. What is it? What could you be looking at?
What's going on?
So Canute, in developing his new philosophy of universal love, he begins to practice it. He has compassion for this monstrous Viking, hugging him, comforting him. He sees all of this untamed, uncontrollable rage, this insatiable bloodlust, and he understands the fallen nature of man, and he has compassion for it. And he feels like the solution is they need to see a transcendent goal, right? They need to have transcendent meaning in their lives. He begins to criticize their violence and say, all of this, there's no point to any of this, right? And so he has a new philosophy for what it means to be a king. It's my job to provide meaning to the people. I need to give them a transcendent goal. I need to give them a reason to unify. And now, as he approaches the battlefield, this monstrous giant of a man, Thorkel, right? Thorkel, he was able to unify the Vikings with his sheer impressive mastery of warfare and his passion for battle, right? But Canute is entering the battlefield as a rival, as a philosophic rival to Thorkel. Thorkel represents the philosophy of Valhalla, the courage of willing to die for your belief in the virtue of an honorable death, a courageous death, right? So Thorkel inspires people to fight because that's the religion. If you die courageously, you are good and you can go to heaven. But Canute enters the stage, right? And he contrasts a new ideology to Thorkel's ideology. And so Thorkel challenges Canute. He says, is your ideology really strong enough to withstand the threat of death, right? Because that was kind of what Canute was saying. Canute was saying, my life is meaningless. But there's a look in his eye that shows meaning and purpose, right? And it's bothering Thorkel because he sees something deeper than what he himself has. And so he throws the punch of death at Canute, challenging the sturdiness of his ideology. Is Canute really willing to die for this new goal, this new purpose that he's found? And as the wind blows through the hair of Canute, Thorkel is dumbfounded to find an ideology that can rival his own. Canute stands up against him as a powerful rival, and he's very curious about what exactly is Canute willing to die for here. And if Canute is willing to die for it, are other people willing to die for it? Is this something that can unite everyone in harmony to pursue together? That's a powerful thing if it's true.
Be quiet. Be quiet.
You know something? Throughout my lifetime, there's only ever been one thing I regret. Why didn't I leave with Thors the night I saw him and Helga in Jomsborg? Because I think if I had, I would have learned what it means to be a true warrior. Well, either way, I'll be fighting King Sweyn. I've made up my mind. You can go, but I'm coming with you. I will aid you in your fight. I want to see for myself what you're going to do and who you're going to become. But if it's anything soft, I won't hesitate to cut you down.
Very well. Then from this day forward, you'll be my retainer.
Wait, but what does that make us?
What's he laughing about? I don't get it.
And so that concludes Canute's transformation from coward to king. As you can see, he started with little to no virtue in either the Viking nor the Christian context. And through being pushed to his limits, he was forced to discover a new philosophy that gave meaning to his life. In fact, the meaning was so potent, it was something he would be willing to die for. And by finding such a potent meaning to pursue, he simultaneously found Viking courage and Christian love. He was able to synthesize the virtues of the two cultures that he was learning from. And in one fell swoop, he was able to overpower the local ideologies and unify the people around him because they found something within him that was more potent, more transformative, more transcendent, more meaningful than what they had to offer. And so people began gravitating towards him, wanting to follow him, unite with him, because they believed that he had something that was worth pursuing. And so I think Canute's story offers an interesting message about an example about how we can think about what we should be doing in the context of a meaning crisis. We should be looking for the North Star. We should be looking for something of transcendent value, right? And then maybe we can use that to inspire others as well.